these computers that have Photoshop. If that doesn't work, how many people have access to Photoshop or haven't installed the trial before?
I haven't installed a trial.
I guess my question should be phrased: who doesn't have access to Photoshop? Okay, two. All right. If you haven't installed the trial, you can install like a 30-day trial.
And then you can just create another Adobe ID and then sign up for another free trial.
That doesn't work though. Like
It doesn't.
It like installs something on your computer that like lets it
That's
know
what I
it's on there.
did.
Even if you like trying to wipe it. Maybe there might be a way to do it, but I don't know. Anyway, hopefully we'll have it on these computers, but possibly not. I'll find out and we can.
Who did you talk to for the computer?
Kathleen sent an email to like a JL, somebody who's in charge of that, I guess. So
Okay.
I haven't heard back yet, though. I just told them today, so we'll see.
All
But tentative plan is we'll do 2 weeks of Photoshop and then 2 weeks of like actual code. So without further ado, first off, if you want to access the slides, I put them right here. Is aaron.me/class. So all the current ones are here. Beautiful design. After 10 weeks of this class, you'll be able to create things like that. So if that's not giving a sense for this class, I don't know what else is.
The minimalist approach.
Yeah. Okay. So last week, I think we were about here. To catch up anyone that wasn't here, we were just kind of talking about the process of designing for the web. You can kind of go over the slides to catch up later. But we talked a little bit about website anatomy. There's kind of, let me see if it's before or after. It's after. Okay. There's kind of like some lingo for web design, just different sections. So there's the header, which is kind of this top bar on most sites. Obviously, this doesn't apply to every website, but most typical like marketing type websites look similar to this. So you have a header up here, your navigation. For most marketing sites, typically it's in the top right, but it kind of depends. Call to action is kind of the main goal of the website. So whether it's you want people to sign up or to buy, to call, learn more, whatever that is. It's typically a button, so a lot of times it'll be right here in this main area and or in the navigation. This kind of top section is typically referred to as like the hero area or the banner section. There's what's called the container or wrapper. It's kind of more a CSS term. But that's kind of this imaginary box where all the content fits in. So for example, let's go to Facebook. No matter how far zoomed out you are, all of the content is kind of centered in this little like container. So they call that usually the container or the wrapper. Not every website has this. Some kind of go all the way across. But most websites typically have this kind of centered area for content. And the reason being is if they have it within a certain width, it will fit on most monitors. So that's what they call that. Footer is the space at the bottom. Actually, you can't see it here, but like the bottom of the site usually has a list of links. And then the fold is the imaginary line of what you can see before you need to scroll. So that's that. I want to talk a little bit about responsive. So responsive is when you design a site so that the layout adapts to the width of the screen. So whether you look at a website on a big monitor or on your phone or on a tablet, it's still going to look good. So here's an example of a site that I like the design of for responsive use. It's kerem.co if you want to check it out, kerem.co. I think he does a pretty good job. So you have the desktop view, the same page on tablet. So you'll notice like this navigation collapses into just this button for space issues. You can't really see the whole thing, but they have the form here and then kind of a sidebar on the web view. But on tablet, they push the other stuff down below and put the form here. And then this heading, or this header type area, is shortened quite a bit. So there's a lot of thought process that went into designing this particular site for mobile. And then for phone view, it's pretty similar to tablet, but just narrower, obviously. A site that I really like for good web responsive examples is media queries. I think it's mediaqueries.com, or it might be mediaquery.es. Let me double check. Oh, I can't see. Is it? Okay. I think this is it. Oh, I put an extra E in there.
I think you need glasses.
I think I do too. I used to have really good vision, and I just renewed my driver's license, and they didn't even ask to do an eye test. They just gave it to me, so I don't even know what my vision's at now. It was actually kind of weird. They didn't ask for like ID or anything. I just filled out the form and they renewed it. So kind of nice. Anyway, so this site's cool. They'll show like just well-designed sites, and then you can see all the different views for the site side by side, which is kind of cool to see how people change this. We'll go over how to do this in code probably 3 or 4 weeks from now. Once you kind of get the hang of it, it's not too complicated. There's just a lot of thought that goes into it as far as making decisions as to what you keep, what to resize, and so forth. Okay. Another tool that's really useful, you can download it from this URL right here. This is really cool. So you can go to any site. Let's go to bamboohr.com. You install this plugin. It's actually just a bookmarklet. I think this is it. Yep. Okay. And so whatever site you're on, it will pull up this little bar, and then you can push these buttons to see how it responds in different views. And you can do it to any site, so it's really cool. This site is kind of well designed in mobile, but some things are kind of broken. For example, like this menu doesn't work very well. But cool site. This site is pretty good. Squarespace.com. Oh, this is square.com.
It's even changed since earlier.
Oh, has it really?
We looked at it earlier. Yeah.
Wow, we looked at this like 3 hours ago. So they do a good job. I really like this site a lot. This company actually just had a Super Bowl commercial. They're kind of like a website building service. They're a really cool company. They have like 250 employees, and they're actually doubling their company size this year. So they're growing really fast. So cool company. Yeah, so that plugin's really nice. You just go to this site and then you drag like their little bookmarklet into your bookmarks. So a couple tips for designing in responsive. One, if you kind of design your website in columns, it helps collapsing things easier. So if you have 2 columns, for example, when you go to tablet view, you just push one of the columns down below the other column. Kind of thinking that way makes the responsive development a lot easier. Another tip is to design in mobile first. So design like the phone view and then grow it bigger from there. And then another one, collapse your navigation, because if you have even like 4 links, they typically won't fit all the way across. So a lot of people will, if these guys, they probably don't need to because they have so few, but if you have a lot, you can collapse into kind of that menu button right there. Okay, so with web design, there's kind of two different things that you can design. One is a website versus a web app. Anyone want to explain kind of what the difference is between the two? Yeah, go for it.
One's the one I never install
Yeah.
on a website.
Uh-huh. Yeah, to like build a website or a web app, you have to install PHP or Ruby or whatever you're building it
Well, I
in.
mean, are you talking like on going on a phone?
Well, actually, that's a good question. So, no, this is something different, but there's a
Oh,
distinction between
okay.
those two as well.
Because I was talking about like you'll go to a site on your phone and it'll pop up and be like, "Hey, install our app."
Yeah, there's that too.
Okay.
And actually, that's a good point. Sometimes you have to make the decision between making a native app versus just a mobile website. It usually just comes down to cost. Or there's some websites where they have an app but nobody cares about the app. Which in that case, like you probably don't need an app if people don't care about it. So what I mean by this is kind of like Facebook versus like a marketing site. So some examples of web apps. Web apps usually have more functionality, and so designing them is different than designing a website like a typical marketing or public-facing website. Web apps are more about usability and functionality. So here's an example. This is like a fantasy sports web app. And so there's a lot of thought that goes into how to make this usable, how to fit all the content on the screen. Here's another one, a couple others. So you can kind of see like these are more about functionality. Whereas there's marketing sites like Bamboo HR, and their purpose is more to sell or to inform or something like that. So if you notice, I have a couple examples here. They all kind of follow a very similar layout. Not that every marketing site has to, but there's some common patterns that can kind of help your marketing site be more successful. So most of them have the navigation at the top, even the top right, just because it's more familiar. So all of these kind of do that same thing. All the navigation is mostly in the same spot. And then this hero/banner area is where the most important content is. So some kind of heading telling you what the website or their product or service does, and then a call to action in the form of some kind of button. So with this company, they kind of explain who they are, explain a little bit more if you want to read more, and then take the tour. That's what they want you to do. This one, same thing. They have two calls to action. They either want you to call them or learn more if you're not convinced yet. These guys, they want you to download the app, or looks like they have like a newsletter thing. Same thing here, learn more or try the trial. These guys want you to watch the video or pre-order. So you can kind of know some trends. There's a lot of focus on the calls to action. So in this case, there's a lot of contrast on this button. With this call to action, there's a lot of white space so that your eyes are kind of drawn to that area. You'll notice all of these have a lot of white space kind of surrounding the calls to action, which helps with focus. So not every marketing site has to follow this pattern, but it's kind of a tried and true layout. So something to consider. This is an example of bad user experience because you can't see the links. Let's see what they are.
You did that just to show us that, right?
I did, yep, that was a lesson. Okay, here's another type of website. These sites are more like, I don't know how to explain them. They're just cool, and their main purpose isn't necessarily usability, but to show off something. So they have some really cool effects. This one's for Sony. All of these animations happen on the scroll. So really the purpose of this site is to wow you to the point where you think, oh, Sony's awesome, I want to buy whatever they're trying to sell me.
Basically, it's only giant companies like Sony that can get away with this.
Yeah, and like the amount of resources it takes to build something like this is insane. But it's super cool. And all of this like happens as you scroll. So like,
So scroll back up.
yeah, if you scroll backwards, it's all reversed. So these are kind of in a class of their own. but these have become pretty popular in the last year or so. Yeah, this is just like ridiculous. They're just showing off now. So anyway,
And then that's it. There's just this weird thing at the end that doesn't do anything.
yeah, I don't even know what they want me to do. Let's see. This other one's pretty cool too. It's not quite as cool, but it's still pretty sweet.
What's the main difference between these kind of sites and the other marketing ones?
So the other ones are more like for an actual company or a product, where there's, if you want to find easy to access information about how to contact somebody or learn more about their company or their product or so forth. These are more specific as like marketing pieces that they try and get like marketing companies to share and go viral. And usually it highlights like a single product. Like this one, it's for Oakley, and so Oakley has their own separate site. But like these kind of sites don't load super fast, and so it's not as practical for like your main company site. But for showing off like a new product or something, they're really effective because they're really attention catching. It's also expensive, so like if you want to do your whole site like this, it would take a lot of time and money. Oh, that part is cool. I should have shown this one first because some of these are so amazing. But when I first saw this one, my mind was blown. I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. A lot of more modern sites, though, are kind of taking bits and pieces of this and implementing it into their actual site. And so you'll see some kind of cool effects like this, maybe not quite as extreme. But websites are becoming cooler. When Flash was kind of the main way to design websites, there's a lot more of this. But Flash is pretty much extinct now. But now JavaScript is kind of catching up, and load times are better. So these sort of things are more realistic now. Let's see here. Okay, we'll skip this one. A couple trends. Design changes, just kind of like I mentioned, Flash was a big trend for a long time actually, and then it kind of phased out. Some recent trends, and this kind of applies for mobile a little bit too. Design is a lot flatter now. So if you've noticed, like Apple's new operating system, Google's new apps, a lot of more modern websites use big flat colors as opposed to like big gradients or shadows and so forth. Longer page design is more modern. We talked about this a little bit earlier. I think we even use these examples, but you'll see a lot of sites that are just a single page instead of like 7 separate pages. So a couple tools. Photoshop is what I use most. For designing websites, the industry standard is mostly Photoshop or Illustrator. Some people use Fireworks, but it's kind of been phasing out a little bit. There's a new one called Sketch that's really cool. Casey likes it a lot. And it's only $70 instead of like $200 or $300, which is nice. The cool thing about Sketch is that it was built more for like web and mobile design rather than how broad Photoshop is. So like Photoshop can be used for photography or a million other things. So Sketch is very focused on web and mobile. Illustrator works great too. I'm not good at Illustrator, so I do everything in Photoshop. And that's kind of what we'll do in the next 2 weeks. So anyway, those are some options. Any questions on web stuff before we move over to mobile? Okay, cool. Okay, so first off, iOS versus Android. This is always a fun debate. As a heads up, I like both a lot. I love Google as a company. I use mostly Apple stuff, but I think both are really good platforms. And also, it's not just those two. There's also Windows. And Windows mobile design, and kind of in conjunction with Windows 7, kind of lifted off the kind of flat design, which is kind of cool. So all of them have their merits. From my point of view, we do far more iOS design than we do Android design. The reason being that's just what we get asked to do. But I like both. So here's an advantage of designing for iOS versus Android from a developer standpoint. I've talked to a lot of developers about this. Developers on average will make more on the App Store, which is why our company gets a lot more iOS projects versus Android projects, is there's just a lot more demand for it. However, we do Android design and development in our company, and there is a market for it. So, but it's something to consider. The biggest difference between designing for Android and iOS is screen resolution. With iPhone, there's 2 sizes. With Android, there's a lot more. This is just like a small chart. So anyone that designs or develops for Android, I feel for you with this. I'm sure this is really tough to figure out, but
That's what makes it fun.
yeah, lots of fun. As far as design styles, I actually really like Android's design principles, and I think pretty much all of the Google applications are really well designed on both Android and iOS. In fact, I prefer Google's apps to Apple's apps in most cases as far as design and functionality goes on iOS. So if you're designing for Android specifically, I recommend checking out this website, developer.android.com/design. They do a better job than I would as far as kind of summarizing what their design aesthetic is like. And a lot of it for designing for a specific platform is just being very familiar with the most current apps with that operating system as far as matching button styles and gestures and things like that. But what's kind of cool about mobile design is you don't necessarily need to match the operating system style necessarily. With both Android and iOS, you see a pretty big range of design styles between applications, which is kind of cool. As opposed to like, if you use iOS, every single Apple app, for the most part, kind of looks pretty similar, but then any third-party apps can look completely different. So it's kind of up to you how far you want to match that. Obviously, the more you can match the operating system style, the easier it is for new users to kind of pick up how your app works. But that isn't necessarily a reason to make that choice. So kind of depends. iOS has their own guideline thing that you can Google. I was going to put the URL here, but it's super long. So Google wins on that battle as far as easy to copy and paste URLs. Apple's is pretty cool. Theirs is really long. I haven't read it all, but I've kind of gone through it. They have a lot of good content, so it's worth checking out. Again, my biggest recommendation is just be familiar with operating system on how it looks. So for example, like iOS 7 versus iOS 6 is a huge difference. And if you've upgraded from 6 to 7, you'll notice that like all of the major apps also have huge design upgrades that look completely different than their old versions. So a reason why that's important, even though the iOS 6 design version of an app is still just as usable as an iOS 7 design version of the app, is that if your app looks out of date, you lose credibility, even though it's still well designed. Which is why pretty much every major app in the App Store has a new iOS 7 version. So, moving on. With mobile, usability is a lot more important. I guess that's a bad way to phrase it because usability is just as important on web. But apps, for the most part, are tools, whereas websites can be like a marketing type site or a tool. And since you have so much less space, usability is very, very important. So for example, thinking about how people hold a phone. So this guy is left-handed, but most people are right-handed. When you're making a decision as to where to put the navigation, for example, thinking about where people can touch on the screen with their thumb is an important decision to make. So since most people are right-handed, you don't want your very most important navigation elements to be in the top left because those are the hardest to reach. So those kind of considerations are important to think about when designing for mobile. So you kind of have to change your mindset as opposed to designing for web. This is a guideline that Apple has, and I think it fits just as well with Android or Windows development as well. They have what's called the 44 pixel rule. So anything that is clickable in an application should be at least 44 by 44 pixels in dimension. That's kind of the minimum size for something that you can tap. So that kind of changes the way that you design, especially if you're designing an app or if you're designing a responsive view for a website. If you have a really important link and it's just a text link, in some cases it's smart to turn that into a button when a website regresses into a responsive view. Something else that will help with this a lot is just testing frequently. A pitfall that I kind of had when I started designing for mobile is that I would design everything in Photoshop and then send it to the developer, and he would ask, like, do you even like test this? Because everything is way too small. Like, my fonts were way too small, and I'd never even like seen what it actually looked on a phone. So testing it frequently on an actual device as you design is really important. There's tools that you can install or download that kind of help with this. This is one I found called Composite. It's like a Photoshop plugin. So there's others that are similar to this where as you're designing it will update it on your phone. A simple way to do this is just save the design in Photoshop and then email it to yourself and open it on a phone. You can actually see what your design looks like. And that gives you a really good frame of reference as far as like how big text should be, if the buttons are big enough, if they're easy enough to reach. So test as frequently as you can. Navigation, there's a lot of different ways to approach this with mobile. The kind of sidebar navigation has become really popular recently. Facebook does this, where you tap like an icon usually in the top right or left corner, and then it slides out the navigation to the side. Again, choosing between left and right is an important decision to make because most people are right-handed. It's easier to hit that navigation if it's in the top right versus top left. But if it's not as important, you could put it in the top left. Tabs at the bottom are really popular as far as mobile navigations go. The reason being that's the most easily accessible spot for your thumb. Facebook just did a redesign where they had their navigation at the top and they just moved it back down to the bottom, probably for this reason. But if your navigation isn't used that often, then it's okay to keep it at the top. So it kind of depends on what your users are clicking on the most. Here's another bottom navigation example. Has anyone used Path before? Path is really cool. They have really cool navigation. This picture doesn't really do it justice. They have kind of this floating navigation button right here. It's just like a little plus sign inside of like a circle. And when you tap on it, these little like menu options spin out. It's really cool. And nobody had really done navigation like this before. Which is why mobile design is really cool. It's so new that it's really easy to be innovative and do things that have never been done before. Kind of a more popular modern navigation style is swiping between things. So this is an app called Scan. You scan QR codes, and if you swipe on the screen, it will take you to these three different screens in the app. They only have three, so it's easy for them to do. So they have settings, scanning, and then I don't even know what that is. I think it's profile or something. So you can, it's history. That's what it is. So you can tap on these navigation items, or you can swipe between screens. Twitter just did this too with their new redesign. This is a screenshot of the newest design with kind of the tutorial. So they have different timelines. They have like the main timeline, and then like your activity with other people, and then like your profile. And so you can swipe between those, and they have these little dot indicators that kind of give you a visual cue of where you're at. And since this was kind of a newer design, when they had the update, they had this kind of first-time user tutorial that kind of walked users on how to use it, which is important if you're trying something new. Gestures is kind of something that's really different between web and mobile design. The way that people interact with an app versus a website is completely different. Especially since mobile design is focused more on interactions. You're interacting with a tool versus browsing a website. Here's a couple different interactions there are. You can swipe up, down, left, right. You can use 2 fingers. You can drag. You can pinch. Lots of cool ways to navigate or interact with an application that you have to think about differently when designing for mobile. Here's a couple app examples that I liked the way that they kind of handle gestures. This one's an alarm clock application, so you just swipe to the left. Low battery, we'll have to go fast. Swipe to the left to turn on an alarm, or swipe to the right to turn it on. This one is some kind of camera application. On a website, you'd have to physically click on these or open a drop down or whatever. But on mobile, you can swipe through, which is kind of a better way of doing things. So mobile design is really fun in that sense. Anyone use Tinder? Part of the reason Tinder's been really successful is because they use gestures really well in their design. So if you're not familiar with Tinder, it's like a dating type app. It shows you pictures of people of the opposite sex, and then you swipe to the right if you like them, or you swipe to the left if you don't like them. And then if they like you back, then it matches you together. But since you can use gestures to kind of navigate through people, you can go through really quickly, and it makes it funner. So I think that's part of the reason that they've had a lot of success. Again, Twitter, they use gestures to kind of navigate through the different pages that they have. Okay, has anyone heard of Facebook Paper? It's like a brand new app that came out yesterday. This app is really cool. The reason being, they've eliminated pretty much every possible button that they can. Almost the entire app you can navigate via gestures, which is really cool. I don't know how well you'll be able to hear this, but that's okay. You can kind of see how the product works without listening, I think. So.
Introducing Paper from Facebook.
Isn't that cool? I don't even really care what the app does. I just think the design's awesome.
Well, the only thing that scares me with something like that is you have to make sure that the app does what the person expects it to do.
Yeah, which is really tricky. I think part of the challenge with that is like when you introduce something like that that's really gesture driven is you have to really like hold your user's hand the first time they use it and explain how it works. And that's kind of a double-edged sword because people that already get it get kind of annoyed by like every time you want to do something pops up and tells you how to do it. So that's tough. I think mobile design kind of slowly evolves to where people just get used to things, and so eventually mobile designers won't have to explain everything. But it's always tough because you have tech-savvy people and then people that just have no clue at all, and so balancing that is kind of a challenge.
And I kind of think like going on mobile stuff, people have gotten more, I could say like exploring, like the old, like my parents, if they had a mobile app, they'd probably be like, I don't know how to open this. But then someone that's younger would probably be like playing around with it, like, oh, it just flips open. It's kind of changed a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I mean, probably everybody here has met a 2-year-old that's like a smartphone prodigy. Like they all know, like they just know how to do stuff. It blows my mind. So I think it's probably just a timing thing. Like eventually people are just going to know how to do stuff. But I think this is really exciting though. I think it kind of shows an interesting possibility of where mobile design could go, where there's less design spent on like buttons and navigation and menus and everything, and you just use the content, which is pretty cool. So I recommend downloading the app and kind of playing with it. You can kind of see how they handled it. I think they did a really good job.
Is that iOS only?
I think it might be now. I'm sure there will be an Android version. It's kind of similar though to Facebook Home for Android that came out like a little while ago. It was like they're like merging of Facebook app with like an operating system to where Facebook was like a part of your OS. I don't think it really took off, but the concept was really cool and it had a lot of like similar interactions. So anyway, a couple of resources for designing for mobile. This website's awesome for icon design, iOSicongallery.com, just a list of cool icons. Icons, iicns.com is another good one for finding icon ideas. With icon design, really just simpler the better. If you look at the most popular apps, their icons are usually super simple, like Facebook is an F, Twitter is a T, or it's the bird. So you can get a lot of inspiration there. Dribble, I mention this site all the time because I love it. Dribble with 3 Bs. You can like search for mobile or something more specific like mobile menu or sidebar, whatever you want to look, and find good examples. For icons, I think we've talked about this one a little bit. The nounproject.com is awesome. You just type in like what kind of icon you want, and then there's icons you can either buy or download for free. For iOS design, you can get a Photoshop file from this site. It basically gives you all of the elements of iOS that you can play with. So like the menu bars. Actually, I'll just show you. This is pretty cool. This is what the Photoshop file looks like. So basically, they've like recreated every single element in iOS as like a layered Photoshop file. They might have Android too. I'm not sure. If they don't, I know you can get them elsewhere. If you just Google like Android PSD.
Google makes them available.
Oh, do they? Perfect. Yeah.
On their design site.
Do they?
No.
Cool. That's good to know. So anyway, that's a good resource. appicontemplate.com. This is cool. They give you a Photoshop file for designing a app icon, and you just basically put in your design, and then it will create like the right formats and all the different sizes you need for iOS or Android. And then lastly, I just want to show some examples of mobile design that I like, both icons and apps. This might be more useful for you to look at the slides later when you can see them in more detail. Here's a list of some apps that I like the design of. Pinterest, Path, Moves. National Geographic Parks was actually designed by an agency in Utah, and they won like the best designed app of the year last year. Really cool. Instagram, I think, has always done a really good job. Facebook paper we just talked about. Automatic is really well designed. YouTube's new design is awesome. Their old one wasn't that good, but their new one is sweet. Google overall does a great job with all their apps. Mailbox is really well designed. Here's just some screenshots I found from Dribbble that I like to look at. We'll go through these pretty quick. This is kind of a more modern, flat designed icon. Again, it's super simple, not too much detail, which when an app icon is so small, it's usually a good thing. This one's kind of cool. This is Wunderlist's old app icon. I think they've updated it. This was one, like the skeuomorphic style was more popular with like shadows and kind of the more realistic approach. This one is like ridiculous. The guy who designed this, like all of his icons are just, they make me mad by how crazy they are. This is actually designed by the same agency that did the National Parks app. This is for Snowbird. Kind of like tells you the weather and like the snow level currently. They do, this agency, they're called Rally Interactive. They do a really good job at visualizing data. They do a good job with everything actually, but this one is Pocket. I think they're using the one on the left right now instead of the one on the right, but they're both pretty cool. This is another example of kind of more modern, flat design, like big splashes of color. This is another one that just makes me mad by how realistic it is. Actually, I want to find this. When iOS 7 came out, a lot of designers didn't really like the new look just because everything went super flat, and so you didn't see those cool icons as much anymore. So this guy's kind of a joke. Here he is. This guy is so good. He did kind of like a parody version of that waffle icon in iOS 7 style. Right here. So there's the iOS 7 version of that icon. This guy's so good though. Like everything he does is ridiculous. Here's his like his steak icon. Isn't that insane?
Wow.
Eddie Labanovsky. For some reason, like Russians are the best app icon designers in the world. Like there are so many good Russian app icon designers. And Czech too. Like people in Czech Republic are ridiculously talented. This is actually another one by Rally. Just kind of a simple calculator. Another simple icon. This is like a time zone app. And a lot of times, like if you'll notice, the best design apps are really like very simple. Whereas like you'll see cool, flashier apps that aren't as usable, even though they look really cool. Sometimes balancing that is tricky. This one's pretty cool. This one's kind of a more modern design too. So anyway, you can look at those later if you want. I think I'm just about out of batteries, so this is well timed. So if there aren't any questions, next week plan on Photoshop. If you can bring your own laptop and get Photoshop installed one way or the other, that'd be great. But I'll see if we can get them on these computers, and if we can't, I'll send out an email. So. And then I think these slides are already up. Right here. Oops. Yeah, if you go to zern.me/class, you can see these slides here. So. Yeah. This guy, he's like good at everything. He's awesome at mobile design, and then he's really good at branding. He shows a lot of like kind of his process. I think I showed you his wireframe earlier, like the hand-drawn one.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I can find that. Yeah, his hand-drawn stuff is really good. But when you make icons like that, you can charge people to spend the time to make wireframes this detailed. It's kind of cool to see his process too when he designs app icons, because he'll do like several different very detailed versions of like the same icon, which is pretty cool. Oh, here's another food one. I don't know why, he just loves his like food app icons. I don't think he even uses them for anything. I think he just does them for fun, which makes me even madder because he's counting.
He has extra time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, he's awesome. This is crazy too. This is all like a Photoshop render. It's not a photograph at all. He based it off of a photograph, but like redid it all.
Do you use one of those pads?
I don't, mainly just because I've never like spent the time to learn one well. But I know Casey's used one. Josh, you use one, don't you? Yeah, I think if you learn it well, they can be really awesome.
Which one do you use, Bamboo or?
Mine's pretty old. It's like an Intuos something. It's like this big. So.
Do you think it'd be good for like designing interfaces and apps and stuff, or do you like it better just for illustration
I think
and stuff?
it's great for drawing, like cutting out images or stuff like that.
Yeah. Some people really like the trackpad.
Yeah.
I have a friend that like designs only on a trackpad.
Yeah.
Like he has like a separate trackpad, not his laptop one. But I tried it. I didn't last very long. I just like the simple mouse, but. Yeah, Andy's even good at like hand inking and hand lettering. He's good at everything.
Yeah. Takes a lot of practice.
Yeah, Dribble's cool. You can find a lot of really talented people like this on the site. I'm not even sure what this is.
It's coffee.
I think it's wine actually. He did a wine app. Oh. They're not wine beans?
That's the cut. Probably his logo.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, he did a wine app too. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, the app is called Sip. Yeah, pretty clever. So anyway, sometimes I like the new flat design style, but you see less of this, which is kind of sad too. So, but web trends and web design trends in general are pretty cyclical, so I'm sure it'll circle back towards this style eventually. All right, well, we'll see you next week. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Thanks, Zach.